City's Los Angeles event. This is our inaugural event. We've never had this in LA, so this is super exciting. We have a great panel lined up for you guys today. Before we get started, I just want to say a big thanks to our sponsors. Oh, my slides are not turning for some reason. Pardon my AV issues at the moment. So just a big thank you to all our sponsors. Like, this event would not have been possible without them. And also a big thank you to all our volunteers who helped out on this event. So if you see them walking around, please make sure you give them recognition. None of this would be possible without them. So a little bit about Conscious Cities, the organization itself. It's an international organization. It's a member-driven collective. It's a grassroots approach. So there's multiple cities involved all over the world. And so now there's one in LA, and there's even more popping up around the US. It really started out as a European model and has spread through a whole network of folks who have an interdisciplinary background or are interested in human-centered design, research-integrated design. There's academic expertise, industry expertise, there's publications, there's literature, all really focused on conscious design and creating a healthy urban environment that we all want to live in. And so another part about Conscious Cities is that they host an annual festival every year across the world on the same weekend. So today is the first day. The event gets started in Milan today. And so I think we're the next event after that, considering our time zone. So this is really exciting. We have a great panel for you guys. And so as the theme of this year's festival is called Regrounding. And so we wanted to talk a little bit about the sense of place of LA's culture and identity, what it means to be an Angelino, and basically just kind of talk about what's all our attachment to the city and how we can plan for the future and be resilient about all the things that are happening around us currently. So that being said, I'm going to hand it off to our panelists to introduce themselves.
Thank you. Had some trouble with this, so I apologize if it falls off. My name is Andrew Flores. I'm an urban planner by education and training. I work in the public sector, currently have nearly 2 decades of experience. Very recently I've gotten more involved in the profession in the plans for health space, so definitely focused on urban development that is mindful of the impact it has and also mitigating or improving quality of life for kind of past developments in past practices.
Hi, thanks for having me here. My name is Yang. I was trained as an urban designer and came to the US for my doctoral study in architecture, so I'm both a designer and a historian, but besides being a designer. I have been teaching architectural history for several years, but I feel I cannot just be repeating myself, so I came back to work with my advisor, David Huff, at UCLA. We have a Tech Research Center affiliated with the Department of Architecture called City Lab. And there we do research, design, and demonstrations, try to advocate spatial justice for Los Angeles and beyond. We have several focuses on affordable housing, creating commons, may consider more just public spheres and marginalized narratives, and also do some radical pedagogical study together.
Hi, yeah, thank you also for having me. I probably am a little bit of an oddball in the group because I don't deal necessarily directly with urban issues, but I am a professor at USC. I'm director of undergraduate programs. I have a research practice called Doris Sung, and in there I use a lot of smart materials for building facades, for building construction, for different technologies, so develop those technologies. But more recently, I've been advocating for thinking about building facades very differently, and that building facades on the outside can be used for public good and specifically for public health. So if you think about in some of these technologies, I work on these collaborative teams on trying to mitigate smog in urban canyons, and also deal with things like mental health, so working on a project to make people smile when they get buildings. So the more we can raise that kind of awareness, and again, deal with on our collaborative teams as psychologists, sociologists, all these different things to really try to change the public view of facades on the outside of the building or other pedestrians.
Hi everyone, my name is Erin. Sorry, one second. I just want to give it up for that amazing charcuterie spread. Like, can we just a round of applause? Thank you for putting that together. I'm Erin. I am the president and co-founder of Architecture and Advocacy. Prior to this role, I was actually a community organizer in public and affordable housing. I also went to architecture school at USC. I know there's a lot of us here today. And architecture and advocacy is actually basically the merging of those two interests. So we work on the ground with residents to help them have more power and more of a say in what gets built in the built environment, and then also help architects and developers do better community engagement.
Hi, I'm Scott. I lead Realm. We're a landscape architecture and urban design firm here in Los Angeles. Again, we could have done this in Milan, but the spread. Fair play. So my practice and our team are really focused on this idea of livability and city making in particular, and looking at how urbanism and quality of life and equity and all of that is really rolled into one. Where our practice has gotten a lot of traction, as the name suggests, we're focused on the public realm. We're focused on the connective tissue within cities that pertains to our streets, our open spaces, our transit, our mobility. And where we've actually found the most traction increasingly has been emerging cities, if you will. And I mean the cities that are not the usual, the New Yorks and the Miamis and the Chicagos and whatnot, but cities like Atlanta, cities like Nashville that are starting to kind of develop their transit systems, to really start to think about their urban fabric. And our sort of hard-won lessons in a city that's never prioritized its public realm here in Los Angeles, we've begun to try to apply that in these other cities and take that elsewhere. And you know, we'll talk about mobility, but LA's metro group, they're recognized nationally as being way out in front of a lot of cities. And I give a lot of credit to what they've done, no matter how I'll disparage them in a few minutes. They are setting a bar that other cities are looking to emulate. So our work on those types of things has really allowed us to move across the country. Drop down and run it back over.
Thank you guys so much. We're so excited to have you here. So I want to first start off the discussion by bringing up the LA wildfires that recently happened. And so if anybody is looking to help out, I know Architecture and Advocacy has a great lot of resources on the website. And if you're a licensed architect, you can also help out and provide volunteer services, design services, for residential facilities that are being constructed. As part of the wildfire, so I think this has really brought a call to action to our city of LA that we need to get it together. We have 3.5 years until the Olympics, but we're also still overcoming a lot of these challenges that are difficult for our own city to handle. And so my first question to you guys is, what can we learn from past Olympic Games? What have they learned from their challenges? We've seen Tokyo overcome COVID. We've seen Barcelona overcome politics. We've seen Germany overcome war times. So what can we learn from our past Olympics?
This is going to get.
I think we can project.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, nobody's ever said that my voice doesn't carry. So I think some cities have dealt with adversity, and I think other cities, we have to acknowledge kind of the opportunity that they've used the Olympics to address a key issue for them. And I think there's a handful of examples, and ultimately the punchline, we have to figure out how we want to leverage this moment. It's 3.5 years out. How much are we really going to be able to do tied to the Olympics? And that's a question. But I think if we start to look at different cities, you know, a lot was said about the Beijing Olympics, but they leveraged it to deliver high-speed rail from Nanjing, right? And they expanded their subway system significantly because of that. London, you know, they created new open space, and really it was sort of catalytic for the east end of London, right? It became the thing that really launched that part of the city, and that, you know, it brought more housing, it brought more businesses. It was a spur, if you will, that they leveraged. My hometown, Toronto, when they did the Pan Am Games in 2015, 4 years earlier, they put out a P3 RFP to developers to build housing for 8,500 athletes. And they delivered all of those units in 4 years. And then when the games were done, that went into the market rate and the affordable housing pool. They didn't build everything in that neighborhood beyond that, but it was the trigger to really bring catalytic change and start to really roll out housing in a major way. And then the last thing, anybody who sees my comments on LinkedIn knows I'm a total fanboy of Mayor Hidalgo in Paris and what she's doing now. They use their 12 years of advance notice to do remarkable things. They have systematically put in ecological practices and policy that has actually dropped the temperature of that city, right? The latest headline, the mayor's taking out 60,000 parking spaces and planting trees. She's done over 1,000 kilometers of bike lanes. They've put policy in about e-vehicles and really reduced the number of cars in the city. That's what they chose to do at this moment, and I think the real question is, what are we going to do? We're not going to have something solved holistically in 3.5 years, but we need to actually use it as this marker and say, by then, we are going to have addressed the housing. Take the catastrophe of the fires, figure out how to deliver fast and furious and get it done, and then make that standard policy and get that done in 3.5 years. So it's less of an Olympic thing, but we have to figure out what our cause du jour, if you will, is, and use the Olympics as the hammer.
I'll take a word of caution then, so Los Angeles had, as we all know, a housing shortage before the fires. And we just lost thousands of homes. We lost thousands of places where people go to work. That pressure is going to be felt across the city. And my prediction is the city of Los Angeles is going to try to sell us as residents on the recovery aims. They tried to do that in Tokyo with the 2021 Olympics. The economic data of that is inconclusive, right? Rio, they sold that as development for a developing country. Economic data of that is also inconclusive. So the question is, are mega events actually a tool for economic development, or do they make inequality worse? And I think we can actually look at the last time Los Angeles hosted the Olympics, which was 1984. And that's actually credited by many as one of the few successful Olympics because it ran a surplus. But when you talk to residents on the ground, many folks in South Central and Boyle Heights actually point to those Olympics as the cause of the 1992 riots. And that's because the police were given broad policing power during the Olympics. This is when a lot of the racial profiling really started escalating. Police swept the neighborhoods on the weekends of men, Black and Latino men suspected of gang activity. And the Olympics were actually really the catalyst, the keg of gunpowder, so to speak, that was ignited when Rodney King was brutally assaulted. So I will say, I think it's our job as Angelinos, as citizens, to really look at this and say, is it community branded, or is it actually community serving?
I think that's actually a good point. Back then, too, in the '84 Olympics, as well as there was a Pope visit at that time, too, right? And actually, bus or the homeless actually in the beaches or remote areas, which again is obviously not a good solution. But I do, I think for the Paris Olympics, it's interesting because I was pitching some projects for the mayor's office in 2019 at that time. And they didn't, they chose this tree project, which I thought, wait, what? You just choose a tree project, right? That's the answer? to the talk, but which I think ultimately, and that is something that is really quite fantastic. But also from the perspective, it's really quite impressive how much they did in a short amount of time, including rebuilding the canal, right? And the cathedral, which to me, that seems like the most hopeful thing. What happens when some there's dedication and money is put there to actually get those done. So hopefully, 3.5 years something will happen.
I want to catch up on that cautious thing. I'm a historian, so I look into the past of Olympics, try to think about why Olympics at all, since when Olympics become this kind of international event, right? And why at certain moments they try to withdraw from hosting this event, because we know, especially after 2004 Athens and Rio, it's going to be leading to a bankruptcy of the government. So I think that if you look at the history of modern day Olympics, it's always tied to this media coverage and involvement of international satellites, broadcasting technology, for example. So media is the thing that helps this kind of event way more beyond just an athletic event or some cultural gathering, but more for national pride, to show an image on the international, a very staged image on the international platform. So especially, but if you look at very contemporary in the past maybe 10 or 20 years, you see that with mass media, actually it kind of had this counter narrative about Olympics as mega event itself as an opportunity of that to be the catalyst push for the cities to have infrastructural environment improvements. But actually, because this is so many criticism that caused this non-use Olympic ideas with all this media pressure. So nowadays, I do want to brought up this idea about media with so many anti-Olympics voices right now across the city, and we're definitely not prepared. It's only 3 years to go. How do we think about some counter power we could have to voice for those less media attention areas to think about how to direct priorities to those that propaganda mega events power?
And definitely speaking to that exact opportunity that each Olympics has to present an image, historically have been identified, whether it be the 32 games, the 36 games, 84 games. There's definitely, I think, currently an opportunity for decentralized narratives with the access to various media platforms and the opportunity to kind of have a conversation as a result of what community sees as needs and what the image that's being presented. So there will be a dissonance, and there's definitely an opportunity for leadership to address those concerns and utilize that as the image moving forward.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a common theme here that these mega events have not been very helpful to the local communities. So I just want to zoom in a little bit on one of our biggest issues in LA is housing, that Scott had mentioned earlier. So how can we leverage these Olympic Games coming to town? Does anybody know how much we're spending on the Olympics? It's $7 billion. So we have a lot of existing infrastructure. So how can we leverage, all of that that's coming into the city to help our local communities? How can that help the underserved population to have long-term sustainable housing solutions?
I'm still jumping on the 7 billion. I'm behind on this, yeah.
I was listening to a talk the other day by mega event researcher, actually from USC. Her name is Erin Robertson. She talks about how this mega event actually has this it's very dangerous, actually, potentially hijacks the resources that could support many of the community development, community needs. And obviously, she said it's too late because she would think, no, it shouldn't cost at all. But this is on the way, and we have no choices. Whatever we are doing now, I guess, is to continue doing what is good right now, and even with or without Olympics. And I was thinking maybe some more, not specifically Olympic related, but some mega development related case in the history. For example, the LA Life community benefit agreement, right? If the communities could have this kind of coalitions and also could motivate some political powers to negotiate whatever close value development would happen, could then give minor benefit to the community, whether it's public sphere improvement, whether it's some job commitment, whether it's rental stabilization, that could possibly be what we could utilize this as an opportunity for communities. Also, just want to use this opportunity to make a little advertisement for what it has been hosting competition of small lots, big events, and a lot of students are here. There are 2 sessions, architects and students, so please apply. This is really a good project, trying to think about how to utilize tens of thousands empty lots across the city that is smaller than a quarter acres to think about how this could reshape our imagination of alternative house and how to shape the future for the city.
I just want to add to that too. I was just brought to my attention, I think yesterday, that there's an advocacy group in Altadena who is now trying to generate the new Sears robot type of catalog house, right? And they're asking architects to come up with these possible solutions, like creatively, so that they can then possibly maybe deal with some of the permitting issues, trying to expedite some of the process here. But I do think that the Olympics actually is impetus for rebuilding some of these environments that needs to be in that, and trying to get that done so that it's not still around hopefully in 3.5 years, which I think a lot of people do. So there's I don't, the housing situation I don't really have a lot of answers to, but I am happy to see that there are creative ways of trying to think how we can get there.
Okay, I used to be an organizer and agitate a little bit. So I think you both answered the last question, the last part of that question very beautifully, which is what can we do as designers? But I have a question for our panel, kind of about that first part, which is which ones of us, who here lives in an underserved community? South LA, do any of us? Okay, we got one hand in the back. Okay, so we actually don't really have the expertise to weigh in on the first part of that question. And I'll address the second part, which is what can we do as designers, is one, admit that we don't have all the answers, and then 2, go find the people who do. And they're not going to be in the site list. Anyway, I'm an organizer and an agitator. This is my job, this is what I do.
I don't disagree. I think the Olympics, you know, we've highlighted some of the things that can be really challenging with them. They're also, we'll say, spiritually represent the coming together. Right? They do have the tendency or the ability to unify people, at least in spirit, if only temporarily. And I think we have to take some of that, borrow some of that, and focus on this tragedy we've had, and put our energies and this idea of being together and being one, and really focus on solving that issue. It starts, I think, very much so with consensus building. There has to be sort of a coalition or a kind of a coming together of council districts, community, and city staff and get everybody on the same page. And it is about understanding what each community needs. Not every community wants or feels they need affordable housing. There are communities that have been underserved that still want market rate. They don't want to just have. So we need to listen to them. I think you're absolutely right. And we've got to get City Hall, city staff all on the same page. I actually think that we need to charge somebody, whether it's a deputy mayor, as sort of a single point above any council member that has a housing first mandate, right? And somebody that is gifted and capable of coalition building in the community. We've got to stop this pissing and moaning in council offices. You know, I don't know what the project was, but the mayor even got into some, shutting down some housing that was proposed in the valley. It's nonsense, right? We've got to start dealing with this. We've got to start with the community. We've got to have somebody who's charged with making it happen. And it doesn't split over council districts. It's just the most innate thing we have. And then I think the last thing is, we are in sort of this pressure cooker now, tremendous loss of housing. We have to stretch and experiment and pull out all the stops to figure out ways to whether it's the catalog idea, whether it's new housing types. We have to explore all of it. And then we have to take the successes from that experiment over the next couple of years, and we have to make that standard practice. Right? It can't be like the parklets and the outdoor dining we enjoyed during the pandemic that all went away afterwards. Suddenly our streets felt really good, and then we let that all go away. So we've got to actually use this time, rise to the occasion, and come up with the best, coolest, most far-flung ideas to solve these neighborhood problems, and then make that standard practice.
Adding exactly to that, I think what you're speaking about, those you leverage the inspiration and utilize that to have consensus building, because one of the questions certainly is not just who are the Olympics for, but in kind of a larger sense, who's going to be living in the Olympics, and that's kind of some of the question that definitely becomes challenged when it comes to affordable housing, because it's very often the pushback of the community that lives there without thinking about who is going to live there in the future.
Yeah, I love the emphasis on the neighborhood here, and one of these aspects about connecting these neighborhoods is like transportation. So some statistics for you here. So pre-pandemic, we saw 35% of LA residents in the metro. Post-pandemic, this dropped to 13% and has never really recovered. So another really large issue in LA that's kind of creating this gap between our neighborhoods, and it's also furthering the wealth disparity gap in our city as well. So in terms of the Olympics, we kind of see some infrastructure happening right now, but what mobility improvements would you prioritize? For the Olympics, after the Olympics? We were actually awarded the Olympics in 2017, so we've had some time. We had 8 years to start planning for our transportation. How are we going to get athletes from here to there? How are we going to get tourists from here to there? So what should we be doing in terms of mobility?
We have the APM. And it will be done by the Olympics. We can help.
I think I think that was one of the biggest concerns for a lot of people, right, the transportation, as it is for me being just as a resident. But I think, and hopefully we'll see more of it, right? I feel like there's hopes in the busing system and the corridor, so they're supposed to be making for these buses. A little less so maybe than the metro. The metro might be useful for the athletes and getting them to the rooms, or for a specific corridor. But the idea of making those bus lanes as well as pedestrian and biking systems. So those are things that I think can actually not only help the Olympics right during that time, but it's something that can really help change our city. But the other thing that I don't think people talk about is, and I think I brought this before in one of our conversations, is what 3.5 years seems like the driverless vehicles are going to do for us, in our system. So how is that going to interface everything, and how's it going to change what we and how we operate essentially? Because years, on one hand, seems short, but in the way of, all these other vehicles, I think it is, a long time from that, since way more work to do. So I would like to see more modeling studies on how that's going to affect our city and potentially and hopefully alleviate some traffic somehow.
Alleviating traffic would be very nice.
Yeah.
I think we can all get behind that. I think one word, what can we do in the next 3 years? Frequency. Who has ever tried to take the metro, raise your hand, and waited 15, 20 minutes a bus for your freaking ride to arrive? And now imagine trying to transfer between buses, between transit stops. Imagine waiting after you get off work and it's dark, it's 8 p.m. and you have to wait 20 minutes as a woman at a bus stop between rides. It's ridiculous. What's the easiest thing we can do? It doesn't require an expansion of networks, it doesn't require bus lanes. You just have to do it more often, and I think more people will ride and have more economic opportunity as well.
I think because we're this vast polycentric city, Metro has been working through the rail specifically to try to connect the regions of the city. What I don't know that's had a fine enough grain to look at yet is is the transit mapped over housing and jobs? Right, really pairing that up. Where are people trying to get to? Where are these centers? And yeah, the cost of rail is huge, and so I think the short term is looking at how to begin to put a finer grain of bus routes of all types across the city, and really making sure that it maps with those two things, housing and jobs. I will also though conflate, and it goes a little bit to what Doris was saying, is beginning to rethink our public realm, our public right of way, and how our streets are organized, and where bike infrastructure, 10 years ago, we worked on the My Big Corridor, the first protected cycle track, and it was Herculean to get it done. It's good to see that it's happening more frequently now, but the first time we proposed it, they threw us out. So there is shifts, but we have to start thinking about how the right of way is handled, how it's apportioned, and look at how do we enhance that, because walkability and quality of life and bikeability and resilience and tree canopy, and it's all tied together. And our street network is our biggest single open space system in the city, right? We've got to start thinking about it that way. We've got to start thinking about this green infrastructure. And so the mobility piece is part of it, but it's that public realm network that's going to rely on that we need to leverage.
So adding on to that, I think besides the last mile problem, right? Actually, the Purple Line had a metro station down to Westwood. Quite nice for UCLA. It sounds like so nice if you have a metro station, but it's still more than 1 mile to campus. How do you manage the last mile? Will you provide more like free light traffic, free bicycle, and also it's about the entire built environment, not just the public sphere, but also kind of city programming, right? What you can do along your path, if you can also do some, especially for cities like Los Angeles, so car-centered lifestyle. This is about changing the transit culture for the city, that you are reimagining your everyday lifestyle. Can you do some errands on your way to school or to work? Right? Can some community partnership also works for some events that increase the street eye sense to increase safety, more lighting, more safety, right? All those can be connected. Should be a new ecology for Los Angeles if we're trying to really imagine what Red Bottom identified one of the ecologies, the freeway. Also, I wanted to add it onto the transportation, especially think about, I think transportation should not be evaluated only on quantitative evaluations about the efficiency, if we have provided enough bus line, enough metro lines to cover the certain radius. One of our research was with a community partner in Westlake, Markarta, with a relatively underserved community with a lot highly migrated population concentrated. It's very ridiculous if you look at the workability score. it was marked as top 3, the best workable community in Los Angeles. The other 2, I think, are Beverly Hills and I forgot the other one. But it's ridiculous because based on our research with the kids, we're trying to do a pedestrian autonomy study with the kids, and they literally pinpoint all the cracks on the sidewalks where they triple the extreme fast car speed, and all these dangerous zones are marked as negative environments that hinder their willingness to work from home to their school. So how do you change and incorporate many of the qualitative evaluation about the transit system, and actually that needs to think about our everyday life.
Yeah, I love what you guys are saying, how mobility is also part of the public realm, and it needs to be designed in a way that enhances the lives of the residents as well. So what I'm curious about is, how do we leverage the design of the public realm for the Olympics, also long-term for our communities? How can we make that a flexible, adaptable space? Is it a multi-use space? How do we do that? What advice would you give?
Sure. I'm going to make my pitch for another city position. New York City hired a chief public realm officer, Yating, who is a rock star. And she is championing the public realm in New York. But this is not a design position. If somebody says, "I'll bring Christopher Hawthorne back," I'll throw a book at you. It's not a design person, it's not a design critic. It's somebody that understands policy, that understands coalition building, that understands economic development, and understands design. And is design, design forward in the thinking. Because the economic development goes hand in hand with how we handle our public realm and our corridors. And so I believe we need to have somebody that really champions our public realm, and that it's not left to DOT, it's not left to Bureau of Engineering, it's not left to all the engineers. Sorry, there's engineers in the room. These are not the people that are going to make our public realm great. They're just not. I think the second thing we've been thinking about in our studio is, what if in this polycentric city we have, thank you for the blue lighting. What if we began to look at each neighborhood, Brits would call it the high street, but what if each neighborhood, we had an intentional attitude about a main street for each neighborhood, and then we began to sort of, focus on legacy businesses and local businesses and providing incentives for them to remain and do better. Then we began to put resources into those streets. This could become as a pilot project, start as a pilot project for the Olympics, right? We could look at those neighborhoods most proximate to some of the event facilities, but begin to think about a Main Street strategy that becomes a sort of a de facto heart for some of these neighborhoods. They want to be of that given neighborhood, and we need to start putting all the resources into the quality of that space. And again, as a pilot project perhaps to begin, but ultimately looking at the walkability issues, the mobility issues, tree canopy, open space. And I think with that, begin to look at incentivizing, anchor institutions and public sector partners to really start to deliver more with their projects. Can you get more density if you take a chunk of that street and really do something better? Right? So I think we have to start looking at ways to move that forward. The news this week about the budget in the city, money's not going to come any easier. So we need to start looking at how to actually cover some of the costs of these things. I still want to know where the Quimby fees go that we all pay on development projects. It just goes into a black hole. How do we begin to leverage that? If our streets are in fact public open space, we not start to look at how to use that for the public realm. And my favorite example of workarounds for the cash issue, Connie, was it you that knew of the soda tax in Philadelphia? Yeah. So you guys know this, Philadelphia, I don't know how many years ago now, levied a soda tax, right? On Diet Coke, this and that. That's paying for the park system and expanding the public realm and urban space system. We got to start to get smarter about this, and not just saying we don't have money. We've got to figure out actually how to find these sources, and just looking at the tax on the soda over there, and how we can begin to leverage that through grants and whatnot, to really start to lift neighborhoods. But do it through the public realm, do it through creating a distinct hub within each community or each neighborhood again. We can't lose the authenticity, back to the culture question. We can't lose the people that live there. We actually need to help lift them up.
Didn't the city do something like that? I remember there's that area in Mar Vista, for example, that was developed, and I think they selected seven streets to do sort of this Main Street, and this many years ago. But I think the ultimate problem for those again is sustainability, right? Is where's the money coming from, who's actually upkeeping it, who's going to be generating. I think that's also where the cultural arts came in and actually was a big part. So it was a really great idea, and I actually wholeheartedly agree with it. But I think there needs to be something that makes the neighborhoods or the little cities or the areas take ownership of it too, so that they can not only put money into it, program it and things like that, but also find ways to just take ownership of it and take care of it and use it and support it in the local space. So I absolutely agree, because I think in some ways that's the only way that we're going to be able to do it in Los Angeles. And in Los Angeles, at the government level, what they can be doing is, again, having this overview and revisiting it and watching it, and not necessarily regulating it, but finding ways to help support the neighborhoods.
We take 10 years to do community plans.
Yeah.
We need to figure out how to ignite a fire. Wrong. Sorry. But to ignite some center of energy.
Yeah, so it seems like there is a lot of issues over ownership, over the public versus private. And we've seen in past Olympics, like Beijing and this, how once that venue was created and developed, then how did that affect the community? How was the venue? So a lot of the times, it's not really purpose in the way that it was intentionally used for, but how can we have that ownership? Be leveraged in a way to actually help our local businesses to promote that culture and to help them thrive in those local communities.
So one I can think of as a great example, this even goes to what Doris was saying of how you get community ownership and sustain funding for that. And I think a great example is actually Destination Crenshaw. I think most of us are probably familiar with the architectural elements, right? It's a new metro station, really rooted in the Black culture and history of the neighborhood. They've even got a mile-long art walk by local artists. Now, what a lot of people don't know about that is Destination Crenshaw is not just the metro station, it's actually a nonprofit. And that nonprofit was founded by 3 local Black business leaders from the community. They have an advisory council of 25 additional local leaders across nonprofits, local artists, local business owners. Ron Finley is on there. He's got an amazing art program. He does guerrilla marketing. He's great. Like Karen Mack is on there. They have a really great team, and that nonprofit has been able to do things that you wouldn't get in a traditional, strictly for-profit model. For example, and I think this is something that really applies to us as architects, and I want to look at this as an encouragement to stick by the ideas that you come up with, because I think we tend to design these things like art walks a lot, and then we get told, oh, we just don't have the budget for it. And so what they've been able to do, Destination Crenshaw, the nonprofit, they actually got a grant from the Getty. And with like $3 million, they commissioned the local artists. So all of the artists that created the art for the art wall got paid. And that artwork is now being owned by the nonprofit itself. So it's not being owned by a private developer. And so I think as creative people, I think we need to find ways to leverage that creativity to stick by our designs, to say, this is really what the community could be, this is the beautiful space that it could be, and find those creative ways on the balance sheet, on the business models, that we can really start to make this possible. Because I haven't seen any other examples of a place-based nonprofit anchoring as much community investment as Destination Crenshaw is. And I think that's, I mean, they're doing grant making to business facade communication. Like, this to me is really a model that can be replicated to exactly what this reviewer is saying. So I'm really encouraged by that.
I don't have any good comments on the suggestions on that, but I do want to be vigilant. I will call this scholar Karen again. She mentioned in her study, she found that actually this theory about Olympics has been a catalyst for local economy has been so pervasive. Everyone keeps saying that, but it's so not true. Based on past studies of several Olympic cities, actually only several big corporate businesses might be benefited from these kind of events, especially for local small businesses. They might even lose part of their revenues or income or being affected because of, for example, traffic control, safety surveillance, or maybe they are not in the tourist destination zones. So think about how inequalities local small business are running in the city and how Olympics might direct tourists into certain areas. But for example, I'm sure Santa Monica might be benefited a lot from. They're not close to any of the revenues, but they are the tourist destination. But what about South Los Angeles? Or even those small businesses right next to the event places, you might think that, oh, they get most of the business, but maybe their business might be affected most severely. So I don't have any good comments on that, but I do want you to bring that up, and maybe community organization is one way to think about how to not a small business trust that it can easily be commercialized by this kind of big events.
Yeah, it sounds like, the Olympics are here for 2 months, and we're stressing out about it like crazy, right? But for these small businesses, it's almost like they get lucky, or they don't get lucky in terms of their adjacency to the venues, or their location or tourist destination if they get popular. But what about in reverse? What can, if somebody is here for the Olympic planning team, like that would be great. But if you were to give your advice to someone from that planning team, how could they celebrate our local artists, our local businesses, the local culture of all of these very unique neighborhoods? What would you recommend to that planning committee?
I think the lowest hanging fruit will be programming, right? And each of the neighborhoods, hoping that they have a Main Street area, would have that programming that, again, is thinking globally but acting locally and perpetrating that. But I also want to suggest other things that can be really, really creative too. Kevin Sherrod, who teaches a studio at our school, teaches a studio that he calls Money Train. And it's about how trains themselves can be mobile because they're not stationary in certain neighborhoods, that they can actually be more equitable by continuously moving around. And so how can this mobile type of architecture be utilized in different ways? And so the students start work on these things, whether it be a library or food production or food delivery or all these types of things that this metro system can be used for, in addition to just people moving, that can go way beyond just the Olympics too. But certainly can be promoted during the Olympics. It could be advertised, media, right? All these different things that can then hopefully generate more interest in it, and therefore more support and ultimately sustainability to the programs.
This is a tough question. I will say, I wish I had an architectural solution, but I feel like it really comes into the policy side. I will say I really encourage now, there's something called 1% for the arts. If you're not aware of that, all public buildings have to designate 1% of their budget to public art. Now that's really tough because one, public art gets into a lot of legal battles that I won't go into. There are some really cool organizations, but there's this whole thing of like, if you have a mural, who owns the mural? Is it the artist? Is it the, you can get sued for a lot of money if you destroy a mural, just by the way. Don't recommend it. But I will say another thing that, things founders think about too much, risk management. And so one thing I will say is I'm part of a cohort right now through an organization called Arts for LA. And it's all a bunch of local artists. And the thing that I'm hearing from them right now is that the RFPs, even for this, or to get on the 1% for the arts, to hear about it, to hear about stuff that comes from the county, that comes from the city, blah, 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 blah. It's a huge learning curve. It's a really complicated process. And so the biggest thing I'm hearing from them is just helping to navigate that, cutting some of the red tape, because unfortunately a lot of the funding for arts for local businesses that's coming from the government is really going towards the big, massive institutions, and it's not really doing a lot for our local businesses, and it's just so hard to write an application. So that's one of the things that I'm hearing from folks.
I don't know that I have anything to do, but just building on that, we talked about how difficult it is. I go back to, can we get to a point where DOT or Rec and Parks, back to the fees, start writing grants for local artists to do those types of things, so that it isn't a big drawn out thing because some big developer or some big institution is doing something, but we can get it at a more granular level to begin to tell the stories within given neighborhoods. And they should be very neighborhood focused. Again, I think leveraging the Olympics and the relatively near term of it all, we're going to have to look at this as kind of an acupuncture type of process for neighborhoods, starting where some of the venues are. It's interesting, this idea of almost a cultural loop, potentially, even if it's temporal. And does that become a specific thing that happens during those 2 months and bring some visibility to these neighborhoods? And then I think, again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but beginning to sort of put resources into some of these neighborhood centers in order to draw more footfall. We need improvements. We can't just let our public realm continue to languish. We need to drive footfall. We need to bring in new business and lift up the existing legacy businesses by enhancing this infrastructure. And then we're going to have to go back to it again. Keep finding new funding streams or mechanisms for paying for that.
Definitely think within that conversation, definitely circling back to having that conversation with the local community. So the Olympics is during those 2 months. So asking that question during this time of year, culturally, what do you celebrate? What can we uplift? Because it's not going to be a question that the Olympics asks or that local neighborhoods or communities are going to be able to connect with the corporate structure of the Olympics, but it is going to be something that we can have conversations about and that we can connect our networks and our community and individuals, that friends and family, and focus attention on that area that needs love, that needs care, that needs investment, kind of in those conversations, direct the resources that we have and apply them to the answers the community gives.
I don't know design solution, but I do want to bring up the media again. Actually, if you think about visibility, media attention does not necessarily mean visibility, right? What the mass media will cover during the Olympics definitely won't cover those marginalized communities, even though they're doing good things with artists, organizations, with their own culture. If they wanted to get those kind of mainstream media attention, probably it will be easily commercialized to suit for certain kind to be attractive for those media attention. I do think if any suggestions to local communities is to definitely take use of this opportunity, because media will be like hunting resources, hunting images during this spectacular driven event. And how can you utilize this as your tool to maybe counterpower and utilize this to support your own advocacy instead of supporting the tourism events?
Yeah, so we opened a huge can of worms. Possible design initiatives, things that LA needs to get a little bit better at. There's a lot of things we need to get done. But, so I'm going to ask you guys, in your opinion, so we have the Olympics in 3.5 years. Is that just a driver for these initiatives, or is that kind of, our end goal here? And if not, what will we prioritize? What should we prioritize right now, in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years? What needs to happen first versus, later, that can take their time in getting a little bit better at? Or, what's that about to go to in the first round?
Nobody wants that.
I think we have to have some positive experiences from it, right? And that really needs to be a goal. And for me, if there's, I know it's not going to fix the transportation problem, but if there's some positive out of it, for example, we just come out with these great bike lanes and have a biking city, that's big, right? In a city that is not a good biking city. So if there's these positive things and that we can really try to find in those gains, I think that will be a big deal for Los Angeles. And that we don't come out with these really bad negative experiences too, where it's gridlock and no one can get to work and people who are not even participating in the Olympics, we have these bad things, and I think then that's going to be horrible. And so in my mind, a lot of it actually just starts from the basic transportation part here. The bonuses, I think, is to be introduced to new neighborhoods. If I could use the Olympics and see that there's activity going on in these other neighborhoods, that I can actually go visit and participate and learn more about a city that I grew up in, I think that would be huge, right? And go out. But I think I mentioned before talking to someone, LA is such a big food culture now. So I feel like the food culture can be a very, very big thing of how we promote it, not just to the rest of the world, but again, within Los Angeles to Los Angelinos. So I think there's a lot of positive things that can come out of it. We just have to look forward to it. And I guess the last thing I'll say is I see the Olympics as something that generally is a very positive thing. I watch every single sport thing that could be there that I never even knew existed, and learn about these athletes that I cheer for, right? It's just these beautiful stories. And so I still and always will think of the Olympics as being this really, spiritual lifting and aspirational thing, even though I learned what curling was and all these different things, and archery and how you hold it, and so I think going off of that in a very, very positive level, and for us to look forward to that, I think it's a big deal. I think we have to kind of go that way a little bit. Can I go this way?
So definitely touching a bit on the agitation perspective, and the positive impression. The Olympics as a mega corporate event definitely appeals to the access of the 1%. And so I think positively to come through that is to kind of make a good impression, but also demonstrate to local Angelinos the potential of a higher quality of life and engage in that demand, that investment that's put towards showing off LA to the world raises the quality of life for people who lived here their entire lives.
If we're making a wish list here, I do feel positive thing is that we're hosting Paralympics, and I think that's an opportunity for the city to do some quick things. I don't have much confidence in for realizing this long term. It's too late, I feel. But the quick fix definitely is still possible. To really apply universal design, and maybe this could start. If you try to think about long term, maybe besides the event revenues, could also think about many of the community anchor spaces like parks, like schools. If the areas surrounding those could be more accessible and kids friendly, and also think about the multi-generation needs. That could be something STEM not as the legacy, not benefits the community, and that could be done in the development.
Okay, so I think we're seeing a lot of major themes in this discussion about, community engagement, organization of civic leadership, and utilizing on existing infrastructure. So I have one last question for you guys. Let's pretend it's 2029, the Olympics are over. What is our metric of success, and what does that Olympic legacy look like if it was a successful Olympics?
I'm trying to keep the cynicism can for this. I think I hope that what can we really do in 3.5 years? I think it's a lot of sort of light touch interventions. What I hope the Olympics would bring about, and what I hope, sadly, taking something from the tragedy of the fires, the idea of intentionality and being very deliberate as a city. We waffle about, right? How many times has the convention center been on and now it's off, and it's on, and it's off? I want to see us use this moment in time where our backs are against the wall, in a manner of speaking, to find intentionality and find action. So, coming out of the Olympics, I don't know how much tangible change in terms of things that have been physically manifested may be evident, but can we be on the way to really pushing housing forward? Can we be on the way to really beginning to celebrate the myriad of neighborhoods in the city? Can we be on the way towards a bigger plan towards resilience and quality of life and livability in the city? We all get tired of plans, and we worry that plans are just going to sit on the shelf and done. But I do think we have to use this time now to test ideas and really challenge ourselves. The old term of a moonshot. Let's use the next 3.5 years to figure some shit out and make a plan to really start pushing the city forward. We have to use this moment. I'd love to see all of these groups that are starting to form up around the fire recovery and all of that. There's some brain power there, there's some money power there. Our work takes us to a lot of different cities. We don't have really visible philanthropy that really changes the city and brings public benefit. Houston is thriving because of it. Detroit is thriving because of it. We fall way short. So I'd like to see some of these kind of really sparkly civic folks, the sober offs and everybody else, start to really leverage real change and drive real change in the city. And in 3.5 years, we have a toolkit and something to begin to really roll out with purpose.
So how would I define a successful Olympics? For me, I think it's actually pretty simple. A successful Olympics is one where families across Los Angeles have more economic mobility after the Olympics than they did before. Period. Yes.
I actually think I already answered this question, so I'm just going to keep passing the mic.
I think defining success itself as problematic and contested questions, different stakeholders at their own destination. I'm sure if Los Angeles Olympics won't make a big step to the government goal, right, the success of the whole event. Maybe for sponsors, successful branding will make them think this is a success or some a memorable image, I'm sure. But I do wish, for me, I feel if one person would say, I won't want to escape the city during the event, it would be a successful event. There are ways to think about this more as a people's event than a mega event, and really makes this event relevant to our everyday life. If any micro level change could happen, I would consider it as success.
This conversation was so interesting, and while we don't have all the answers of how to solve all of our problems, I think it was really important to have the conversation in the first place. So Please give our panelists a round of Thank you guys so much for being here. We really appreciate having you. We're gonna hand it over for Q&A. So Sophia is gonna be bringing the mic around. So if anybody has any questions in the audience that they'd like to ask, now's your time.
Thank you guys so much for this insightful talk. So I know this is mostly a question about like design and like policy and urban planning, but I am not in design. I'm not an urban planner. I'm just a normal person. So maybe this is a little outside of the scope of the discussion, but what are some ways that you think that beyond just advocacy, we can be integrating some of these things in our everyday lives in ways that feel sustainable and realistic to kind of incorporate this principle of conscious cities?
Can I ask what brought you here?
Connie.
Oh, okay.
I would just say simply, really but continue thinking very community-wise, right? Thinking, about how, even for the fires, even though there's individual homes that have been devastated, the way that we have to be thinking of rebuilding is community-wise. And so we can all start to really support that, even now in what's happening in your communities or other communities, or find ways to bring more people to the table, more people to talk. And I think Erin brought this up too, how we really need to find what's needed and what to deliver and how we're going to do it, because every community is going to be in fact different. So it's just something that I think everybody can participate in now in whatever you do.
And I'm gonna push back a little bit on your question, because you said, what can I do other than policy advocacy? And I think the answer is policy advocacy. I think, it's weird because in a lot of, I would say, left-leaning circles, we're like, what do we do, the world is hurting on, like, if you've seen what is going on with the change in administration, and I mean, what can I do as an individual is show up for your neighborhood council meetings. When there's a community outreach event or a development, go to it. Be part of your community, be part of what's going on in your neighborhood, be part of the advocacy organizations and the community-based groups that have been doing systemic change in our neighborhoods for generations. I mean, it's an uncomfortable thing. It's going to push us, it's going to challenge you, but the personal is political. And if you want change, we really have to fight for it, and I do still believe that government is the way to do that.
Pass it down the road.
I'll meet you in the middle.
Thank you.
Thank you for this discourse. This has been fascinating, so I appreciate you all sharing. I'm a structural engineer, so I appreciate all the conversation, but my mind goes to, from early on, we were talking about legacy and the ending of our appreciate your question. Order is power in our city in terms of legacy. I mean, as we go, I'm not going to make people raise their hand if electrification was included in your transport to this event, but it increases every day. And my reality on sort of designing and building projects is it's the long lead item. Like, good luck in permanent power, and where it's going to increase, we're having this huge influx of international community come here that will require power I promise you we don't have, let alone green power. There's no green power program in this city. That is embarrassing. So, I mean, is there any thoughts or, yeah, we should talk.
Yes.
Right? And the legal benefit of the shading if it's PPPs or whatever, right? I think there's really something there, even decorating it to whatever, respond to the neighborhood or whatever it is. I really would love that to be part of the conversation. I'll continue that. Appreciate you.
I'll nominate her for next year's panel. Is that our answer?
That's fine.
Oh, we as a free power. There's all this light pole with solar panel and
It's very limited, you're right, it just does not even begin to address the demand. And so, this effect on our environment of generation of power when it's not green is miserable, right? It's abominable. Like, we can do better, for sure, and there are other cities that are doing much better, other metropolitans that are doing far better than we are.
I thought California paid for people to take out their grass, put on the local planting,
There
put
was some
solar
funding.
power on the roof. There was a lot of program that we do it.
Yeah, house by house is great. I'm not dissing that. We should do that. We should take advantage of that. That's not gonna solve the demand of the buildings and the transportation and all the other things that require power. You're right. Individually, let's go for it. Let's do as much as we can individually, but that's not gonna.
It's supposed to pull into the main grid too, though. When you have produce extra power, it goes into.
The percents of generation and usage are like this. Yeah. You're right, though. It's better than nothing, for sure.
You're tapping into my cynicism.
Your button, stop.
Yeah, good way to team me up. Look, part of the problem is we're barely a pothole filling city, right? This is the part that scares the hell out of me relative to the fire recovery. On the best of days, we can't fill our potholes, right? Our public right of way are trees. You know our urban forestry department, they don't like trees to touch, they want them further apart, right? I swear to God. I'm sorry, I swear to God, right? You have trees on your property, they don't want them touching the trees in the right of way because it's a maintenance challenge for them. The systems are in place that are not going to yield anything great. We need systemic change. We need to start thinking about all of those things. We pitched an idea that instead of like Bureau of Engineering, like the street engineers being responsible for like the public right of way, we actually need to give it over to the Bureau of Sanitation. Bureau of Sanitation is the only group that actually works on both sides of the property line. And if we start thinking about our streets and tree canopy as green infrastructure versus say concrete pipe infrastructure, we have to start rethinking how we approach it and have sort of citywide strategies for moving forward, because we're a dinosaur otherwise, right? We can't plant street trees, instead we're talking about painting streets with reflective material. It's like, we gotta move forward, we gotta catch up with the rest of the world, because other cities are doing it, other countries are doing it much better than we are.
So I feel like a lot of the conversation has shifted in many of the questions back to how policy needs to change, and everyone can agree that the political atmosphere in the city is somewhat of a nightmare. What are ways that residents, and not just designers or people trained in urban planning and urban design, can get basically anarchists in their own neighborhoods, right? Like what are ways that neighborhoods and communities can come together to go around a political system in order to affect effective change in their built environment?
So the question is, how can they go around?
Say they can't
Policy.
get through, so there's so much red tape and they don't understand the process, and, say they find their own funding's not necessarily the core of the
Oh, you mean
discussion.
like start a nonprofit, like architecture and advocacy? So that's my board member, so that's why it's funny.
Well, sure, but
okay,
ways that residents could circumvent political red tape or, policy red
It's a
tape.
big conversation right now, isn't it?
Well, the PTA
No, I
can
know.
have some voices. I mean, in all the community, if you go to school, the parent put together, they can go to city hall and ask for stuff. I mean, I've seen that done.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same answer to my question earlier. I'm not going to recommend any circumnavigating policy, you've already been recorded. But there are organizations in every single neighborhood that are like PTAs, grassroots organizations Go attend a meeting, volunteer with them. Strategic Actions for a Just Economy is great in South LA. They do a lot of land use advocacy. I'm trying to think of some of those really quickly, but a lot of these organizations are also rooted in the legacy of the civil rights movement and the legacy of like land use advocacy has been going on for a long time. Unfortunately, policy change is slow, but there's also your neighborhood council. So there are ways for I think everyone to participate and like again, like really it matters like individual residents realizing that they have power and control over the world around them and advocating for it and showing up and advocating for all the things that we're talking about here.
In my lifetime, it's very different now. I think young people and their interest in charitable organizations or starting human advocacy stuff is huge. Very, very different when I was young. So you see these high school students who are coming out starting these organizations, which is just so, inspiring to me. It's like, wow, how are they thinking about these things? And then they go out and try to find funding for it, try to build organizations. Some of them grow and some of them don't. But I think the collegiality and the interest and the support is out there. And I do agree, if there's not already organizations, there are people who are there willing to start and begin those things and find interest. So I feel like it is there, right? And even the older generations like myself are willing and interested to support because that kind of structure, that kind of attitude, that kind of thinking was not there when we were young. But it's something that I think we all would like to support. Not a direct answer, but I wanted to recommend that maybe urge you to read written by Benjamin's research is writing about virus justice. So even a minor positive thing you do every day could accumulate into something big. So just care what you care, just keep advocate what you want, demand, and there are organizations there to help uplift the voices, and there are designers eager to help translate those into, and there are some like
Virus justice? Virus justice.
We have one more question?
Yeah, question.
USC student here, Doris Sung, the money-trained student at contract. I was in that studio, so during our research, we found out that many communities in LA that need public transportation might not be near the Olympic venues. So we found out if we focus on develop towards Olympic, that might ignore those areas that probably don't have Olympic events or venues near them. Or if any general approach that public transportation can benefit all the areas, not only Olympic but also other non-Olympic areas.
Could the same, if you take the same idea, couldn't you also use like a food truck industry and mentality to dissipate even further? Right, so like buses theoretically go to places that the metro can't go, right? And again, if this money train can only stay on the tracks to certain communities, that's one thing. But maybe there's a way to think creatively of how to disperse it, decentralize the system even further, right? Because these food trucks do get around, and it probably is unfortunate too, because maybe they only go to areas, that are more wealthy where they can sell more food or do what they want. But maybe there's a way to think of that too. I don't know. You know what I mean? Again, I think to your question, it's going to require creativity. A certain amount of creativity to think even further and to think out of the box for what Scott's saying is like, in some ways, we need something fairly radical. To keep pushing these ideas because obviously a lot of these stuff that's going on is not working very well. And if we just make incremental change like this, it's not going to be felt very much, right? We need to make something bigger happen.
All right, we'll do one more question. appreciate the discussion. I too am not a designer or architecture, I'm a public health professional, so I can't help but wonder and think about, as part of this discussion in designing a conscious city, how can we protect our local communities against potentially a public health calamity with tons and tons of people from around the world coming in, bringing in infectious diseases, and then in addition to that, but yes, all sorts of different kinds of infectious diseases, and also kind of protecting the connective tissue and accessibility to our healthcare ecosystem. Would love to hear your guys' thoughts on how we protect our local. Sorry.
I know you probably were too young, but in the old day, besides passport, you have to have this other health booklet that you have all of this vaccine and shots and stuff before you can enter US.
Yeah, but
We have a
Kennedy's
lot of
don't like
exemptions for
I, on the way over here, I was listening to the New York Times Daily.
Yeah.
And it's on a book, and I can't remember that it just came out, that's talking about how distancing and, you know what I mean, COVID lockdown actually was ineffective. And these by these two Princeton, researchers, they come in, I'm like listening and I'm trying to focus while driving because it's like, wait, what? Wait. And they won't say anything really political about it, and except that these are the numbers. So when you say protect ourselves, is it, you mean, for something like COVID stuff, maybe, you know, once you hear this podcast or read the book, maybe it's not such a big issue after all. And I hate to say that because I was a really big, mask wearing, distancing, person. But when you hear this, it's like, it's like, wow, right? It just turns things around. So there's too many things I think also to protect ourselves from health issues. And like I said before earlier, I do work in that area. So, I'm designing smart heating facades to help with lung disease and stuff like that. But specifically with international people coming in and bringing viral stuff, I don't have answers to that. I don't.
I'm curious, how is the medical community preparing for this? Like, are you all having events like this, I assume?
Yes, and there's a lot of noise about what public health professionals in the public sector especially are able to and allowed to share, given kind of changes in terms of administration. So.
Oh, it's top secret.
No.
Oh.
It's political, yes, yeah. It's politically charged, and what was previously science is now questioned. So.
Which
Well,
one?
I'm curious, how do you think buildings could help the work that you're doing?
I'm not sure it's necessarily buildings, it's more so transportation and accessibility to healthcare. So I think we can't necessarily prevent infectious diseases or viral diseases from entering during the Olympics, but potentially creating more accessible system to healthcare and creating an environment where we can have kind of in underserved communities, especially South LA that is historically medically underserved, or East LA is historically medically underserved, with a little bit more accessibility to healthcare.
We just started on a project up in San Jose actually, that has it doesn't roll off the tongue, but it's the Silicon Valley African American Culture Center. It is housing, it has recreation facilities in the gym, it has theater space, but its anchor is a clinic. And it also has like a job court in front of it. And their focus is to pull all those things into the same footprint and to begin to drive healthier outcomes by having all of that, both physical activity, healthcare, food options, housing, and trying to pull all that into one footprint so that it's, and begin to model it and replicate it as well. So it's an interesting, you're talking earlier about the mixed use projects and what they usually are and how that stack of things can and should begin to shift to address more of what you're talking about.
That's the whole idea of what is healthcare and what is well-being, and it's part of having childcare, part of having a job, part of having a good work, and that there are many non-profits who are investigating exactly this. If I may, this has been fantastic. I have one question. We've been talking about all those tourists coming. We have 10 million Angelinos. If we make Olympics just for us and focus and then make sure every neighborhood can actually come and participate, maybe we are going to have our main streets. Maybe we don't bring the vector from whatever we are worried about.
No external tourists. I like
No
it.
one, because
I like it.
the whole concept is that it's a celebration of the city. So why we're talking, I would say like, let's not talk about tourists. Let's make it Los Angeles.
We just had the LA Marathon.
But it's an interesting point because I forgot who we were talking about this with. In most other countries, the Olympics are representative of the country, but yet when it comes here, it's of the city. And so we need to really lean into that, to your point, and make it about the city. Because nobody's going like it's the American Olympics.
Nobody might want to come.
I think this idea of a celebration of Los Angeles is actually a really potent thing. That's what I was trying to allude to, how it can be, it's fraught with issues, but it can be this galvanizing thing. So how do we leverage them?
Actually, sorry, just two comments. One is the Williams sisters' success was based on previous Olympics, and then some sports which originated in the Valley are going to be repeated in the Valley. It's like one of those interesting new sports. Those two, I think it's the long course equestrian or something like that.
BMX bicycling, pickleball. BMX bicycling.
BMX bicycling. Exactly. Thank you.
That's my husband.
But maybe we can replicate this.
Alright, so I think we're on time, but this discussion was amazing. I love to involve the audience to us. So please give another round of applause for her. So we still have some time left to hang out, have some more charcuterie, get a drink, and just stop your waiting until after the discussion. So feel free to just hang out and relax, and you can love and listen to all your questions afterwards also.
Thank you to Connie.
Yeah.